Hey there, ADHD Rewired listeners. This week is your last chance to join our summer coaching and accountability groups. We are just 1 week away from kicking off our summer season. My section is now full and has a wait list, but we do still have space in our other coaches' sections, and we are still offering that $500 discount for their sections, so don't wait.
Before this group, I felt overwhelmed with the changes I wanted to make, and to some degree, I still feel that way because there's a lot of things I want to do, and now I realize I can go slow, and that's okay because it's relearning how to do things that work for my brain and work for me. And going slow will help make them stick.
Join us either Thursday, July 6th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, or Friday, July 7th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. These will likely be our final registration events for the summer. As always, check the website for the most up-to-date information. That's coachingrewired.com to get started. More information at the break. Now, on with the show. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Renee Rosales. Renee is a mother, an educator, an advocate, and transformational leader who actually just won an award, which maybe she'll tell us about in a minute, and has made it her mission to create a better way for the neurodiverse community. As an innovator, she is the co-founder of 2 of Arizona's first virtual schools and founded D.R.E.A.M, a business aimed at supporting the neurodiverse from birth to adulthood. Renee is a visionary, consistently striving to make the intangible tangible by building bridges and connections in relationships that positively transform all aspects of life. Renee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here today.
So tell us about this award that you, before we hit record, you were telling me that you were just honored with.
I was just honored with Businesswoman of the Month in Flagstaff, but I'm actually more proud of a recent award I got 2 months ago, which is the Top 50 Global Neurodiversity Evangelist. Theo Smith has started something called the ND by Design, and he actually looked all over the world, and I was considered one of the top 50. So that was an incredibly humbling and exciting honor for me.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So what got you into this world in the first place?
The journey's been a long one. I was actually diagnosed late in life at 29 with ADHD. I went undiagnosed for years because girls typically weren't diagnosed in the 70s and 80s when I was younger. And I didn't really embrace the ADHD identity until I started recognizing neurodiversity in my own children. I also, in my work as an educator, because I was a co-founder of 2 of the first virtual schools in Arizona. That's a very interesting demographic. You have a lot of neurodivergent students that are actually attracted to that kind of educational venue. And I was working with them regularly and just saw a lot of the real challenges that these individuals had. I began to really relate to them personally. And then on top of that, as I was recognizing them in my children, I saw a lot of the gaps in our education system and the lack of support and resources available to individuals who are neurodivergent. And I wanted to change that and create a better space, a better world for my own children and all of the individuals that I've had the opportunity to work with throughout the years.
Have you always been someone who sees a problem and goes big with coming up with solutions?
Yes, absolutely. And the follow through, as far as my ADHD is concerned, has sometimes been a challenge. But I think the coping mechanisms that I've learned and strategies that I've incorporated have really assisted me. I know they work with my family, and I really set out to try to share those with as many people as I possibly can.
So how are you managing your own ADHD as you're trying to manage all this other stuff?
Well, I ended up creating a business because based on what I actually did. As an educator, and ever since I was a little girl, I always used acronyms to help me remember things. I didn't realize it, but I was using at first when I started to do it, but I was utilizing acronyms to train my brain to think in a more effective way. That really became synthesized later on, but I think the starting point for me was when I walked out of an IEP meeting with my son, and it was the one of many IEP meetings, but I got a diagnosis finally, and I had been strongly suspicious of the fact that he was dyslexic. And as an English teacher and a writer and a word lady, that was devastating to me. I sat in my car and I had a keychain that said, choose joy.
Mm.
And I decided to make an acronym for joy on how to inhabit joy in my everyday. And that's kind of where it all started. And from that, once I started implementing that acronym into my everyday, everything kind of started improving. I started making acronyms kind of my mantra. And that
What
is
was the
really what
acronym for joy?
the acronym for joy was: journey forward, organize to optimism, and yield to wellness.
Hmm.
So I call those like advantage actions. Now I've synthesized all the information and I use my own strategies that I make up myself, because no one strategy works for, different types of people. You have to have your own personalized strategies and approach. But I created the advantage actions and then I chose to implement them however I saw fit that day. And I literally focused on the journey toward joy for a year before I
Hmm.
moved on to anything else.
What did you discover on that journey?
I discovered that a lot was about my perspective and my approach. The impossible became possible when I brought in the right perspective to the equation. I started to see my trouble as training opportunity. Like I could get really upset or depressed or frustrated because this IEP meeting went horribly, or because this student isn't getting it, or I could choose to focus on what I can learn from that circumstance. And it really kind of streamlines my thought life. It helps me really find focus, which is hard for us ADHD folks.
Absolutely. So, do I have this correct? Do you also have dyslexia?
I
Oh,
don't.
you do. Okay.
I don't have dyslexia. My husband actually is a self-diagnosed dyslexic. He was homeschooled when he was younger, and through the journey with our son realizes that that probably came from him.
Hmm. So, in 2021, you left public education,
Yeah.
and I think you said around this time you were seeing a lot of trauma in your kids and yourself. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It was a big change for me. 2020 with COVID, the pandemic, was a huge change for all of us. At the onset of the 2020 school year, 2020-2021 school year, literally a week before school started, we got a call that my husband's brother was gravely ill and his children needed a place to stay. So we moved my niece and nephew in with us. Of course, literally they had, left alone while their father was taken away
Mm.
in an ambulance. So they had obviously experienced trauma. They were 5 and 6 at the time. It's the beginning of the school year. It's COVID. I have had 2 sons at home at the time that were transitioning to online education. Flagstaff stayed online for the entire school year. I was scrambling at how to appropriately care for these kiddos and support them in the right way. I was working in a building. Obviously, an online school is not housed in a building most of the time, but my office was in a building and it was at a trauma informed school in Flagstaff. So I got a hold of some material to take some trauma informed parenting classes. And when I was in that class, I sat there listening to, childhood trauma and all the different situations, and they were categorizing this. And I realized that my son, who was dyslexic and had childhood apraxia of speech and severe vision challenges, had experienced as much trauma as these 2 individual little kiddos. It
Mm.
had just been a very different type of trauma. And I saw this intersection between neurodiversity and trauma, and I recognized my own sitting in the car with that keychain, like, where is my joy? And I wanted to do something to really change it. So that really started my research. And a year later, I ended up leaving public education to do this full time because that is where my heart and passion is.
That's amazing. So you wrote some curriculum too for for neurodivergent people from cradle to grave. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, what I found as an educator was that, I should have known all the right resources, who to go to, who to talk to. I was a school administrator with and an educator with over 20 years experience in public education. I'd lived in Flagstaff for years, for over a decade. I should have known where all the supports were, and it was still like searching for a needle in the haystack. When I was looking for answers, I kept coming up short, and I was going to the right people, and they didn't have all the answers. I found out early on, FUSD did not have a structured literacy program in place when my son was diagnosed dyslexic. We now do, which is amazing. I like to think I helped that process a little bit, but the resources weren't there, and so I wanted to provide sort of a clearinghouse for families. So initially, my idea was to create curriculum to literally guide families through. My tagline is lighting the way, to guide families through the journey of, and I started with Know the Way at Home, which was when it's a course for parents that have little ones that are first recognizing this, where to go, how to find support, what are some good self-care techniques, because no one is talking to the parents about how to manage the journey. They're talking to the parents about the right approaches for to educate a child or to maybe help with behavior issues, but there's not like an all-encompassing support. You would look for support groups, but those are even hard to find, especially in small towns. So I set out to create it and offer put everything I learned on the table for others, so that they didn't have to share in the same struggle that I did.
Was there a particular thing that so you said your tagline is light the way or light the path,
Yeah, lighting the way.
lighting the way. Was there a
Mhm.
particular sort of spark that brought this light as sort of a something to that guides the why of what you're doing?
I think the spark is that I've learned that the journey is really challenging, and you need to have joy. You need to have light in your life, in your perspective on the journey. Without that, it can be very overwhelming and depressing. And because you're going to face micro traumas, you're going to face challenges. These, neurodiversity, ADHD, these things are not necessarily visible things. So you go into a room and people are assuming you're just like everybody else. And then they make negative assumptions sometimes about your behavior, that stuff that you're doing is purposeful or meant to hurt them. And that's not what it is at all. And so by inviting joy and inviting the light in to the journey, I think it makes it a lot easier. You're less likely to be consumed with things like depression, or anxiety, because you have hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that you will get through this, that you can increase your executive functioning skills, that you can work in environments where they're sensory safe for you. So that's the spark. I needed the light in my own life, and I think everybody needs that.
What would you say to someone who says, "Yeah, but like everything in my life right now is a dumpster fire. Joy sounds like something that's really high in Maslow's hierarchy, and I'm not right there right now." What would you tell people?
I hear it all the time, especially like on socials when I'm reaching out to total strangers. And I would say that forward, focus on forward. What can you do? Just the smallest little thing that can help you move forward. One or the other, like I say, you can't live the dream until you practice the dream: diet, rest, exercise, activity outdoors, and mindfulness. And I always tell people, you're not going to do all those things. You're not going to get it all done. So you need to practice grace with yourself, and you need to put a star on your chart or in your own personal headspace. Pat yourself on the back if you do one little thing. If you drink your 24 ounces of water in the day, if you go on a walk with your dog, I mean, whatever it is, and just focus on forward, because backward's not going to get us there. And sometimes, that gets you through the now moment when you feel that overwhelming sensation, like, okay, what can I do to move forward right now?
let's keep focusing on forward. But first, we need to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to keep moving forward in this conversation. So we will be right back with Renee Rosales. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our thriving coaching community. With over 1,000 adults with ADHD who have successfully completed our award-winning 10-week coaching program at coachingrewired.com, it's evident that the right tools and the support of others with ADHD who truly understand our struggles, that we can tackle our toughest challenges without having to do them in the hardest way possible. Self-acceptance and positive self-talk sure are great bonuses too. And if you are listening to this on the week it came out, our final registration events are on Thursday, July 6th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for Pacific, or Friday, July 7th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. We know that living with ADHD has its own set of obstacles, often making us feel like we are constantly living life on hard mode. We also know that ADHD management doesn't have a one-size-fits-all approach, and that's where coaching comes in. In our coaching and accountability groups, you can explore the various tools and strategies we'll share with you, supported by a community that will be cheering you on along the way. Secure your spot by getting started at coachingrewired.com to join our interest list and to kickstart your pre-registration process. Registration is by invitation only, so once you've completed the pre-registration steps, don't forget to hit that RSVP button so you can join us on Thursday or Friday. The dates and times and all the details are at the website. Join us, embrace growth, and go beyond just ADHD management by investing in you. Let's thrive together. That's coachingrewired.com. We can't wait to meet you. That's coachingrewired.com. All right, we are back. So I want to kind of dive into some more of the work that you are doing. I had asked you in the first part of the conversation about the spark. And I was sort of wondering how much of this too was sort of observing that the trauma piece that you were seeing in the schools and really looking at that intersection.
I think that was a huge piece of it, because I saw, I was every day working with kids that felt defeated, at home and at my workplace, and that had trouble focusing on the good. So one of the things that I set out to do personally before I even thought of D.R.E.A, I honestly didn't even think of the business until it was probably end of April of 2021. So I had gone through almost the whole school year, and I had been trying to figure out ways to focus my children's attention, my students' attention in a positive way. We were all struggling. We were going through global trauma at that time. And everyone, needed kind of a life jacket, right? We were just trying to get through. We were surviving, and I wanted to help people move from surviving to thriving. So I started thinking of creating these acronyms. The hypothesis in my mind when I was creating them was that if I could focus these acronyms on increasing executive functioning skills for myself, and also, children that are going through trauma, they struggle with the same things that neurodiverse children struggle with, those executive functioning skills and sensory processing stuff, self-regulation. So if I could create acronyms that were all based on positive words and help my kids have a way to think through these difficult things, or when they're in the moment and they're feeling overwhelmed, how do we get to the next level? How do we get out of this negative mindset? And so one thing that I did, I started just coming up with all these actions for how to journey forward, how for joy, what does organizing for optimism look like? And for my neurodivergent kiddo, he loves to organize. He hasn't been officially diagnosed with autism, but I believe that that's part of his profile. It's just not his primary diagnosis. And so I started having him organize things in the house, and it was helping me because I struggle with organization too. And so I would clear space and let him go through containers and organize for me, and that would help calm his anxiety, and it was helping me. We invited the little ones into that same behavior, and there were different strategies that I was employing with them, and it was working for us. It was getting the kids out of that mindset and into a better space. And it was literally moving us from just surviving or from like it was a way out of a meltdown. The little girl, my niece that I had with us, she was just 5. And so for her, it was like the yielding to wellness meant sometimes let's go on a walk, let's pick some flowers, take a hot bath and calm yourself down, like whatever she needed to yield to wellness in her body and get her back in her body and less in that negative mindset that was going on. So, and it was a trickle down effect. I mean, it started working. And then when I actually sat down to write the curriculum and came up with the idea that I wanted to create a course, all these acronyms just came out of me. And it didn't make sense to me as an educator because I was a curriculum specialist. So I know exactly how to write what a lesson plan is supposed to look like. And what I was creating was not a traditional lesson plan, but I'm neurodivergent. So it's allowed to be non-traditional. And I know that it works. And it started helping people even outside of my family unit. That led me to go on and I became a cognitive coach and specialist, which now I get to help all kinds of people, and people all over the place, which is right up my alley.
Mm. So I was curious on what does organize for optimism? What does that actually look like? What does that mean for you? And can you expand on that?
Sure. So my organizing for optimism in the beginning, it looked a lot like just organizing a space. So I'm feeling dysregulated emotionally, and we don't talk about that enough. I think with ADHD, that, I love Dr. Russell Barkley because he addresses the fact that emotional dysregulation is a big part of
Hmm.
ADHD. And that's something that I really have personally struggled with. And throughout those last 2 years, really, it was a challenge for me because there was so much emotion going on in my house. So I would literally go in and organize, my hangers in my closet or take a cupboard at a time and pull out the glasses and the cups we didn't use and organize the space like that. And that made me feel better. It was less decision making for me. I organized my wardrobe. I changed to a capsule wardrobe. So I had fewer decisions and not a bunch of pieces that
What's a capsule wardrobe?
my best friend's in retail, so she told me all about this. But basically, you take your clothes and you look at your pieces that are from white to black and varying shades, and you pick a few colors that you might really love. Like for me, it's navy and orange or red, and you pick mostly solids. You limit your wardrobe, so you get down to I think ideally it's 30 pieces. I'm nowhere near there yet, but you get to you get down to as few pieces as you can, and you can make hundreds of different outfits with those 30 pieces. And they all are supposed to fit on you well. You don't make those impulse purchases as much. And so that's what it looked like for me. For my kids, it looked very different. And then time management is also a piece of the organizing for optimism. I implemented a lot of micro habits into my everyday to make things easier. My household was bigger. There were more kids. There was more laundry. There was more stuff to do. And so I started trying to look for spaces where I could streamline. Like instead of having a laundry day, I would put a load in every morning and move it to the dryer before I left for work so that there was a clean, load. We just had to fluff and fold when I got home, kind of a thing. And so wherever I could shave off a few minutes and the emotional regulation piece, I found that the organization really helped with that. So it was my go-to. I'm stressed out. I'm upset. Let's go through the sock basket and organize.
So
That's
for
kind of
you,
stuff I
you
did.
you find that very sort of calming and regulating.
Yes.
Okay. Then what do you want to say yield to wellness?
That's the hardest piece for me.
Talk about that.
If I'm totally honest, I think a lot of moms we're the last on our own list, so
Yeah.
we'll forfeit a trip to the gym to, take the kiddo somewhere or to take care of somebody in need in our house. And so that was difficult for me. So yielding to wellness became a family thing. I had to make it a whole family activity. Like, let's all go on a hike. let's all go on a walk right now. Or maybe it's just activities outdoors, like it was just getting out in the sun. So maybe we're not exercising, but we're playing cornhole in the backyard or something like that, So that's the hardest piece. One of the easiest ways for me to integrate the yield to wellness was deep breathing. And I started really practicing that. So simple as like 5 breaths in, hold it, pause, 5 breaths out. And I think that mindfulness is really, really helpful, particularly, well, I think for all neurodivergence, it's helpful, but particularly for us with ADHD, it seems like it helps me really center.
So for you, that yielding to wellness is really about priority, like making sure that that's a priority.
Yes, because you're not gonna be able to thrive if you're not well.
Absolutely. It is so often when stuff starts getting busier and busier, that tends to be the first thing that goes for people. And I also agree that that's the thing that we have to hold on to for dear life. Like if we have a higher level of stress, stressors happening, whether it's at work or like, not only do you got to hold on to the wellness stuff, but maybe even double down on it.
Right, exactly. And I think it's like super important. And everybody's strategies are going to look different, right? Because it doesn't always work the same. What someone else likes to do, another person, it might not work for them. And that was really important to me too when I was doing this work, was to make the strategies kind of open ended
Mhm.
and work with people individually to figure out what that looks like for them.
Yeah, it's a big principle, guiding principle of our coaching program too, is that, it's we're not here to give you the formula, because the one of the missing ingredients of the formula is you. So it won't work because we didn't factor you specifically as an individual for that.
Right.
So we encourage people to, take the ideas and the framework and like put it into the sandbox and play with it and make it your own.
Right. Yes, exactly. Have fun with it. Get creative. Do whatever works. You have to figure out what works for you. But the goal being, let's move us forward. Let's elevate.
So let's do this. Moving forward again, we are going to take another quick break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about setting up both home and work, since we are talking about adults here with ADHD. So we will be right back. And now for your new favorite part of this show, a fake ad. Hey folks, do you ever find yourself losing focus at your desk? Are there just too many distractions? Do you have 20 or maybe 200 tabs open right now as you listen to this podcast? Well, let me tell you, we've got a solution for you. And it's something so groundbreaking, it might seem like it comes from a sci-fi movie. Introducing the Intelligent Workstation, the smart desk and chair that is redefining productivity. ADHD reWired is proud to be sponsored by this non-existent game-changing technology. The Intelligent Workstation isn't just a workspace, it's a productivity partner. It keeps track of your work patterns and adjusts environmental factors like lighting, temperature, even noise for optimal focus. Plus, it cares for your health too. It will remind you to stand, stretch, and take those all-important focus resetting breaks. Because look, we know how easy it is to just ignore those reminders to stand up and stretch. Our Intelligent Workstation doesn't just cue you to stand up. It will physically help you rise up and gently lean you forward to help your ass out of that chair. You can also use the Jiggle Me option that turns your chair into a high-intensity jostling machine that will only stop once you've got your derriere out of that chair for 5 minutes. And you can connect it to any smartwatch or fitness tracker so you can require yourself to walk a certain number of steps or get your heart rate up to a predetermined rate before your Intelligent Workstation will allow you to return to your desk. Well, this product doesn't exist yet. What is available is our thriving community of like-wired brains, because we really are more than just a podcast. We have our coaching groups at coachingrewired.com if you really want to level up your ADHD management. And we have our Adult Study Hall membership community where you can engage in real-time accountability at adultstudyhall.com. Then if you want to support the show, consider becoming part of our Patreon community at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. There, you can get uninterrupted listening experience of this podcast when you join us, starting just $5 a month or more. And if you want to taste of group coaching, patrons at $25 a month can join me every fourth Tuesday of the month for a monthly coaching call. Find everything we do at ADHDrewired.com. And thanks for listening. All right, we are back. So Renee, one of the so you created these curriculum, and you had the know the way at school, know the way at home, know the way at work. You have another one with an acronym. I'm looking at my own notes, and I just realized that was an acronym for Connect. So let's talk about work for a minute. What are you trying to help people with around work when it comes to the stuff that you're helping folks with?
Yeah, really, it's been how to cultivate neurodiversity in the working world. And the Know the Way at Work course is really designed to help build connection between more neurotypical people and more neurodiverse individuals and help create that awareness. I talk about the ABCs, and there's two sets of ABCs. One is the acronym based communication system, and that's what we're talking about. But the other is be aware, be brave, be curious. I think that one of the key factors in inclusivity is curiosity, leading people into conversations with questions about them. Most of the time, we don't present that way. I know as a neurodivergent myself, I used to come in the room and tell a story. And the story doesn't necessarily have it didn't have anything to do necessarily with the person I was talking to. And so now I try to always engage others with a question like, how are you doing? What's going on with you? What'd you do over the weekend? And just starting there, because when you're asking that question, you're demonstrating value to the other person. I think that's the big challenge in our work environments is that people don't feel valued anymore. We're kind of going in our little silos, we're getting our job done. And one of the big missing pieces in the corporate world is that sense of value and organizations making their human capital feel valued, but also just coworkers helping one another feel valued in that space. And that's the starting point for real inclusion in my mind. I don't think we need to even talk about, not to devalue the importance of diversity in every aspect of diversity. But when you start with recognizing value, diversity and recognizing the value of diversity is automatically becomes a part of it, because you're seeing what that other person has to bring to the table, what they have to offer. And that's really what that course is about. And then coupled with that course for the corporate world, I have another course that is an acronym. It's Emerge ND. It's also about helping neurodivergents better manage and comfortably share and fully embrace their neurodiverse identity. I think so often we're afraid to unmask because masking is a lot of times what got us the position we might be in. So saying to our employer, I really need this accommodation, and sharing with them your neurodiverse profile is something really challenging for so many people because there's been such an associated negative stigma for so long. I sat I was sharing with my doctor what I was doing, and the doctor left, and a nurse was in the room with me, and she said, I haven't even told the staff here that I'm dyslexic. She said, because I was afraid I wouldn't get the job and I don't want to be fired. And so she's literally hiding the struggle she has reading with her employer when there are so many tools to us accessible to profoundly assist with that. And that employers will readily make available, I think, to their staff for the most part. I can't say, obviously, there's still discrimination going on, but I know the big corporate world is really because of the new guidelines related to environmental social governance. They're about supporting employees, but they don't know who their neurodivergent employees are. So part of it, and they can't ask that. You're not required to share that, but understanding how to support them does require a share sometimes. So it's this catch-22. And so what I do is take neurodivergent individuals through that process of how to safely unmask. Is it always going to be met well? No, but then what kind of support should you have in place to make sure when you are met with a barrier or a wall in association with this, are you going to have the network of support that you need to appropriately manage that challenge?
I've been hearing a shift a little bit in from the phrasing of high functioning to high masking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I really like that because I think it's like, sure, like we might be high functioning, but if you only knew how hard it was to make it look like we have our shit together when we don't have all our shit together.
Right. No, exactly. And like all day, every day, you're masking these behaviors. And, I talk about the difference between masking and what I call editing. To me, there's such a close connection between those two things because masking is usually you're hiding something. You're doing that to avoid a challenge or an obstacle. You're hiding, you're trying to keep something in the dark. Editing doesn't involve hiding. In my mind, it's an acronym too, but it's efficiently directing your impulses and temptations. Because I have the temptation to incessantly talk, right? I do all the time. I have a temptation to overreact and get emotionally dysregulated. But to become more effective, I can work to edit my behaviors for my personal effectiveness, not to hide. Now, is that harder for me than it is for everybody else? Yes. And the place that I probably struggle with that most is in the relationships that I value the most with my family members, and my husband and I always talking about it, but I'm sharing, hey, my emotional dysregulation is it's a real challenge for me to maintain self-control. So give me some grace here.
You had
We just had
mentioned,
that conversation this weekend.
yeah.
Sorry.
And how did that go?
Well, it's actually going better and better because we're out with it and we talk about our mixed neurodiverse relationship that we have. And I think that awareness, back to be aware, be brave, be curious, is the first big step into making a move forward.
I definitely, the whole notion of curiosity like that in everything that we do, it is such an important just mindset to have that curious learner mind where it's, sort of putting assumptions at the side and just being kind of it's almost like child wonderment, right? It's like,
Yes.
that's interesting. Like that's so different from what I was thinking before. Or why would this person say that? That's what's their perspective? Like there's just when we can be open to that, it can be truly life altering. What comes
Totally.
when we're curious. You had
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say that it was moving into the whole curiosity moves you into your real power. And the W and the power is will and wonder. You said wonder, and that's really what it is, directing your will to like truly wonder about the people around you, about how you can engage in a situation in the most effective way. And then this whole world opens up to us when we do that.
I think this whole world can use a lot more curiosity.
Definitely could.
You had mentioned about the guidelines around something, and I was trying to capture it in writing, and I only captured guidelines, so I don't remember the rest of it. About something around workplace. Do you know what I'm referring
Yes,
to?
I was talking about the environmental social governance guidelines and the social governance piece. So we hear a lot about the ESG, and now I believe it's by 2026. The SEC put out regulations last summer that big corporations, all of the publicly traded corporations, will have to adhere to environmental social governance guidelines or mandates. And they've built a regulatory framework around that and what it looks like. One of the challenges to that piece, and that's where you get like the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion movement with HR systems. But one of the challenging pieces truly is neurodiversity because it's all about self-disclosure. And if you're not disclosing, it's very hard to run data according to how you're meeting the needs of this population if this population is not disclosing their needs to you. So there's actually going to be, a federal mandate requiring companies to provide accommodations and support to neurodiverse individuals. And there will be serious penalties to those that don't. But it's hard to aggregate the data if we don't have the information about, how our employees are truly identifying.
Hmm. Do you know offhand of like where people can learn more about that?
You know what? Some great companies to look into that. If you look up ESG, you can find information about it really seriously. But specifically look up the social governance piece. My actually know the way at work course, actually, I built a quiz at the end of the course just related to the social governance standards. And you can go to companies like EY, like Ernst& Young or Deloitte or SAP and look up, because SAP is not one of them, but PwC, Deloitte, the big four accounting firms, they're responsible for auditing companies according to their ability to meet the ESG standards, because they are the big auditors in the world. And so they have a lot of information on their website about what those social governance standards look like. The environmental governance standards are pretty much all out there, and we're feeling that because that regulatory framework went in place first. And so the social governance piece is more challenging, as you can imagine, because it's a little more ambiguous. There's not like, we're not putting up solar panels here. So that's been harder to monitor and more of a challenge for them to figure out how they're going to do that. But you can find that information on this website.
Is there any particular advice you would give to a employee if they are trying to bring some of this information to the workplace to share? Maybe they have a receptive boss.
If they have a receptive boss, I would definitely bring it with that information, because you're showing value for your employment by even letting them know, because many employers, aren't necessarily aware, especially if it's a smaller business and they're not publicly traded. They may not be aware of these ESG related standards. So bringing that to the table with you and then saying, I want you to know who I am so that you can have a story. So when there's another employee down the road, let's say, you want to grab hold of an amazing opportunity with somebody that is also neurodivergent and they're looking to be appropriately supported, you can use my story as an example. So offering that up and saying, I want to bring my best to the table. And these are some things I'm open to compromise here, but this is what I could really use as some additional support at work. Maybe it would be great if we had a sensory safe zone. If we can't have a sensory safe zone at work, can I take a 15-minute break or a 5-minute break here and there? And then know that with those things and with the allowance of those requests, there's also accountability associated with that. It's not like I get all of this and I don't have any accountability at the end of the day. We still are accountable to bring our best to the table. And what I found in my work is that neurodivergents are some of the most creative, incredibly loyal people on the planet. And when they feel invested in a company and they feel a company is invested in them, they're going to stick to it. They're going to bring their best to the table. So having more people on your team that are like that, all you employers out there, listen up. That's a great, great thing to have. They're an incredible asset for your team. And listening to them is extremely valuable, but it needs to be reciprocated. There has to be reciprocation in that relationship to make it work. So bringing to the table what you have to offer, and I'm going to bring this every time. I will do better if you offer me this. And so showing it as a plus and showing them the value add, I think, is really important.
And when you mentioned the idea of creating like sensory safe places in the workplace, I've heard of sensory safe places in education, and it makes me sort of think about like universal design, like places that have like the fluorescent lighting that can flicker sometimes. Like,
yes,
that doesn't even need to be a single accommodation. Just when you're replacing the bulbs, like get better light bulbs, like little stuff like that, right?
I know. I mean, it's ridiculous to me how many schools, like we can build all new, huge, beautiful schools. And then we still have all of our other schools with these old wonky fluorescent lights that are giving kids migraines every day. Like some of this stuff is so easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take rocket science to figure it out. Invite somebody who is well-versed in universal design into the table with your architect when you're building a new school. I mean, it's just that connecting the dots that I think we fail to do so often, that it's build that awareness, create that curiosity, and we've got a better world.
This was fantastic. Renee Rosales, the website FERA.com. Is that an acronym?
It actually is an acronym, but I won't get into all that. It's more, the big acronym is LIGHT. It's Listen, Integrate, Guide, Honor, Transform, but it's actually THEARA.com. So it's FERA.
FERA. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You got it. But everybody pronounces it wrong. I made the word up. There's a little story background with that, but it's okay. We don't have time for that right now. Maybe next time.
All right. So we got FERA. Well, the link will be in the show notes. Just go to the show notes on our website and you'll link it there and can see everything that Renee's doing. So Renee, thank you so much. This was delightful.
Thank you. It was incredible. I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you. You're amazing, Eric. I love what you're doing.
Thank you so much. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHD-rewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brené Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tibbers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.